I'm Rabbi Patrick, and welcome to Kihila. Greetings, beloved friends. We've got a bit of a long one and a bit of a tough one. So I thought I'd start off here before we do our covenant, before we do our intentions. Tell you what we've got going on this week because it's kind of big. So it's Monday when this is dropping. So Tuesday, July 22nd, adult learning at my house. So out here in Midlothian, what is kosher? What's a kosher pickle? What makes it kosher? Jews are a very gastronomic group. You want to try to understand what is the Jewish food way, which we call kashrut, but like what is the Jewish food path? Okay, so if you want to learn more about that, it's a free class. Yeah, we'd love a donation, but we mostly would love to have you around our table. And yes, there will be snacks. And of course, because it's a class on kashrut, on kosher, where it comes from, if it even matters, why should it matter, if at all? But the snacks will be kosher. So at least you have that. Okay. So if you're interested in that, love to have you. This is not sponsored by Heder Meats Virginia, but I'll give a shout out very quick to them because they take care of our Shabbat. So wonderful group of people, great farm outside of Charlottesville. You can go there. They give tours. You can go hang out on a beautiful farm. They're next to another farm that does really cool stuff related to like tinctures and herbal medicine and things like that called Refualary. I think we should all be supportive of these guys. So if you're interested in kashrut, kosher farm, there you go. And as a bonus, that Friday, so Friday, July 25th, home hosted Shabbat was going to be at Pam's. I know you may have RSVP already thinking it's Pam's. Pam's going to be out of town, so we've swapped it to my house. So you'll get to try some of what Heder Meats produces. So it's kind of cool that way. So you learn about kashrut on Tuesday, and then you get to experience it Shabbat dinner on Friday. So the home-hosted Shabbat, it is just Shabbat dinner. It's not service. So if you're totally new, right? Like if you're someone who's like, I don't even know if I could sit in a service and prayer, and what am I supposed to say? And it's in Hebrew, and oh my God, and what about my spouse who's not Jewish? And you're fine. Please come. We'd love to have you. Tickets are available Friday, July 25th, 6 p.m. Jewish Standard Time. Now, if you say I'm not an evening person, the next day we're having Shabbat morning Torah study again at our house. It's a very Midlothian month. Saturday, July 26th, we'll have bagel sandwiches. We'll kind of discuss the Torah portion. I'll guide us through it, and we'll see what we can learn from it. Lots of spiritual wisdom. The following week, spiritual school, July 30th. This is online. So this is Matt, who's an amazing teacher. Would love to have you online. Spiritual school, July 30th, and it is free. So go on our website, kihilarva.org, and you can get tickets and RSVP and all that beautiful whiz bang. So let's get into kind of a big topic here. We're going to just take a little breath. I know that I need it. And I'm going to say this line from Deuteronomy 16:20 as we set our intentions. Think about what your intentions are in this podcast and in your day, right? What are you looking for when you saw this pop up on your phone, on your computer, in your email? What are you hoping for this? What are you hoping to hear? What are your intentions? Is this going to be the thing that motivates you? Is this going to be the thing that consoles you? Is this going to be something that's going to give you a little bit of energy? Is this something that's going to just be a back of mind? Whatever your kava note might be for this time that we have together. Our intention setting verse is Deuteronomy 16:20 in part. Zedek, Zedek, Tirdof. Justice, justice, you shall pursue. Give yourself a moment. Hit the pause button if you need to, and come back to me. And I just want to say, this is a kudos to a rabbinical student who now is a rabbi. My notes say rabbinical student, but actually he was ordained not too long ago. Avi Mitzner out in Tejas, out in Texas, who helped me with thinking through this topic. So I'm going to take a little sip of water. Let's have it. So religions tend to take credit for things they didn't do. And I'm saying this as clergy, but it's true. Religions do tend to take credit for things they didn't do. Very common in sort of progressive religion, right? We tend to read our values into the text because we want these spiritual messages to resonate with us and our time. So sometimes we give religion credit for things that it didn't do. This is like the dad in that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, who's convinced that every word in every language is connected to the Greeks and their culture. So if you're going to do this class on corruption, you got to be careful because it's easy to say, like, oh, well, we Jews invented being against corruption, right? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to say that, everything in a democracy is somehow rooted in Jewish ideas and Jewish values and all of that. But here's the thing, some of them are, and they are hard truths worth exploring. And you'll either be inspired by some of this, or you might never download this podcast ever again. So we'll see what we can do. Part of this that's really neat is we kind of get to learn a little bit about these extra canonical texts, meaning, we're not just Torah, right? We're not just Hebrew Bible. We have these other texts, these other responsa, these other pieces of wisdom literature in the Jewish tradition that we sort of lead our lives by on a practical level. So one of those is Shulchan Aruch. This is a text that I think is sort of favored more in the Ashkenazi world versus the work of Maimonides, Rambam. That is a personal hot take and not maybe even historically accurate for all I know. Okay, so this is Choshen Mishpat. So that's a section of Shulchan Aruch. By the way, Shulchan Aruch means set table. And so that should be a nice reminder that you should get tickets for Shabbat dinner. Okay, so Choshen Mishpat 163, and it starts on verse 1. So, for any community matter on which they cannot find common ground, they should convene all taxpayers, and they should agree that each will voice his view altruistically. That was a hard word for me to say. Literally, it's Leshem Shemaim, which means like, in God, for God's sake or for heaven's sake, something like that. But basically, it means whatever your belief system, it should be reflective of a deep spiritual value, and that word that's being used as shemaim is like heavens. Okay, so something like that. So you'll voice your views altruistically for the sake of heaven, let's say. And when something comes together, when everyone sort of agrees for the sake of heaven, then you follow the majority. Okay, so if the majority has an altruistic opinion, a way of dealing with a problem that everyone kind of agrees is the right thing to do, and it's spiritual in its nature, no matter what the issue is, it's probably just a practical thing, then okay, we follow that. The majority vote, if you will, is right. We do this in Judaism. Actually, all of Jewish practice is really about this idea of inclining towards the majority. Okay, but if a minority refuses to follow the majority, this gets a little rough, it is permissible to force them. And then it uses this line then, even by order of star worshippers, which is a code for non-Jews, to pay their share to the tax collector selected. Okay, so there's a person whose job it is to go around and get the taxes from the merchants and from the houses and whatever. And if you are a non-Jew, there is one Torah for everyone, meaning there's one law for everyone. If you live amongst the Jewish people and there is a tax collector who's been selected, sure, you may not have voted in the majority, but you're in that society. You want to play by that society's rules, then you have to pay that tax. If one boycotts and refuses to offer one's opinion, so if you don't even go to vote, right, like you don't convene as part of the taxpayers, then whatever your opinion is disregarded, and the opinion of the majority remaining decide the matter. Okay? So it doesn't sound incredibly spiritual, right? I started off with Zedek, Tirdof, right? Justice, justice, you shall pursue. But when we talk about this idea of like hard lessons of the democratic spirit, this is what it is. It's kind of boring and it's kind of wonky, right? And it's kind of a thing where no one really gets what they want. No one's truly satisfied. The person who doesn't show up does not get a vote. That's just the way it works. They're completely disregarded. The majority is right. If everybody is talking for the sake of heaven, which is a goal, a lofty goal, then like look, you made the vote. The minority maybe says no, I don't want to deal with it. The people who are part of that society but feel like they're not connected to that society, no, you still are part of it, and you have to do whatever the majority inclined, right? Even if your opinion was not the one that everyone inclined towards. Okay, so that gets me to kind of lesson one here, which is that in a well-functioning democracy, and that's the idea of for the sake of heaven. We are idealizing this like functional democracy, right? In a functional democracy, no one is fully satisfied. How about that? In a well-functioning democracy, no one, including you, including me, is fully satisfied. Okay? So for example, a judge must not decide in favor of poor people because of pity or compassion. But then again, the mighty don't get to consume the poor either. So this comes from Exodus. So it has this line. This is Exodus 23, 2 through 3. You shall neither side with, and it says the mighty, the mighty. Well, I don't know what that meant. I was looking at the Hebrew, and then I looked at the English, and then I looked at the Hebrew, and I lost myself because I was about to say Achrei Rabim. Okay, so I don't edit this at all, so my bad. Let me start over, okay? Stick to the English, kid. Okay, you shall neither side with the mighty. Okay, so Rabim. Okay, so it could be mighty, it could many in number, it could be the great. It comes from the word Rav, which means like master, but you shall neither side with the mighty to do wrong. You shall not give perverse testimony in a dispute as to pervert it in favor of the mighty, nor shall you show deference to a poor person in a dispute. Okay, so in other words, you're the judge or you're on the jury. You do not get to side with the people who are the most powerful in your society to do something wrong. Okay. And you also shouldn't lie in your testimony or lie sort of in your way of dealing with an issue so that it favors the mighty, right? You can't rewrite the story so that the mighty are the ones who win. Having said that, you also can't do that for the poor person or the marginalized is maybe the word we would use today. Okay. So people will say, well, like, yeah, of course I'm not going to lie for the powerful, right? I'm a good person, right? I'm not just going to go along. I'm not, I'm not that kid who just sides with the bully in school, right? And then makes up stuff to make it seem okay, right? That I side with the bully. Okay, yeah. You're like, no, listen, I am on the side of the weak, the marginalized, the lost, the forgotten part of my society. Yeah, but also in this kind of situation, in a legal situation where it kind of really matters what the truth is, you don't get to show a deference to people just because you see them as people who should be treated better on a social level. So Rashbam, who's a commentator, gives this idea. If, in your opinion, the majority are about to commit an error in judgment, do not remain silent because they are the majority, but state your view. Okay, so if you see someone powerful, if you see something going on, um, you have to deal with it, right? You still have to state your view, Rashbam is saying. And he says this applies even if you know beforehand that they will not accept your viewpoint, but that of the majority. Okay, so even in a situation where you think that it's already kind of dealt, right? So I've been to these sort of city hall type meetings where it's like a 7-person panel or an 8-person panel, and they all vote yes, right? Or they all vote no together. Even if you kind of know that's the way this is going to go down, you still need to state your voice and not just incline towards the majority if you think the majority is doing something immoral. Now, if you think they're doing the right thing, okay, well, a different story. But your voice still matters, even if it's futile. It goes further into Deuteronomy, more of this issue of judgment, right? And it says in 16:19, you shall not judge unfairly, and again, you shall show no partiality. So in any kind of issue where you're judging people, and I hate this idea of like, I don't judge anybody. Not true. We all judge people all the time. It's built into our minds, right? This is how we get through life. Is the frying pan going to be hot, right? That's a judgment. We do the same thing with people. We generally feel first and then think second. So like I had this boss once. This was like years and years and years ago. I was a kid, and there was just something about him that reminded me of someone who I was in like middle school with, and the hair on the back of my neck just like went up every time this guy was in the room. Now, like I'm much older than that by then, right? But there was something animalistic there, right? And so I get it, right? Like we feel first and then we think second, and that job very much did not work out because of that. I had that gut feeling, and then I would get kind of annoyed and I would want things my way, and I felt like, how do you get to be in charge and whatever? And yeah, and like that made me a person who would judge unfairly because maybe that the person's actions are fantastic, but I'm using these like gut feelings that I have, and then I'm using my mind to try to rewrite a story in such a way that he was the bad person in the office, right? And so what these texts are doing is they're saying, look, if people are doing the right thing, it's okay if you don't like them. If they are doing the right thing, you cannot judge them unfairly, right? Because they're the majority or because they're the minority. It's about, did the person steal something? Yes or no? Okay. Right? Did the person say they were going to do one thing and they did something else, right? Again, it's all for the sake of heaven. But when we judge, we do not have the option of saying, well, I don't like that group, right? Well, or those people are always doing such and such, right? We don't get to do that. We have to be impartial as best as we possibly can. And that goes back to like what I said earlier, right? Right? This idea that in a well-functioning democracy, no one is satisfied because boy, do we want to take down the other team, right? That's just who we are. And that's okay. It's okay to admit it. One of the great things about Judaism is that, yes, so Maimonides said this, that it sort of helps to civilize us. And, look, you can agree or disagree on some of that as far as the power that religion has in people's lives. But I do think, on a personal level, for me, one of the great things about Judaism is that it's very much in this world and how I'm supposed to live in this world, but it pushes hard against me, right? It does not always validate my feelings all the time. So in some ways, Judaism shouldn't be something that completely satisfies you, right? Avodat Hashem, like working for God, right? That's got its ups and downs, and that's all right. So again, going back to lesson one here, democracy is not supposed to be perfect, at least how you might think perfection is supposed to operate. It's supposed to be about judging impartially, inclining towards the majority if the majority is right, and of course, speak up if something bad is happening. Okay. But just remember, it's not all about our team, whatever our team is. Next, and this is something that I believe quite deeply. Corruption destroys democracy, and it's that simple. Corruption destroys democracy. Going back to Exodus, and there's actually some evidence that a little bit of this was inspired by, or at least in the same realm culturally as the Code of Hammurabi. So that's a little bit of a Bible nerd inside whatever. You can read the scholarship online if you want me to send it to you. But Exodus 23:8. Do not take bribes, for bribes blind the clear sighted and upset the pleas of those who are in the right. Okay, here we go. So do not take bribes. Okay, why not take a bribe, right? Like, in some way, maybe it's not, maybe it's due to you, right? Maybe it's like, look, I've been working at this place for so long. Well, listen, I've been sitting on this committee for so long, right? Or I've been dealing with the parents, or I've been dealing with the teachers. Like, maybe this Amazon gift card is due to me. Maybe I've earned it, right? For all the nonsense I've had to deal with, right? But here's the thing. The bribe is going to blind you. Like, if you think of yourself, and certainly I think of myself, I think everyone thinks of themselves as clear-sighted, right? As like a moral person, right? If you think of yourself that way, but there's that pressure, there's that little bit of a something poking at your side, it's going to blind you. Like, that's just human nature. Thank God Judaism approaches human nature with some reality, right? and it upsets the pleas of those who are in the right, meaning we're creating yet another obstacle between the people who are right, technically right, and the people who are doing the judging, right? When we allow bribery, in other words, the most moral, upstanding citizen, right? The person who just, we all know who that person is, right? Like the person who just, they mow other people's lawns, right? They're always willing to watch other people's kids. I remember growing up, there was always like some guy fixing a motorcycle. Like everywhere I lived, there was some guy fixing a motorcycle or whatever, and would always give like the kids a ride, right? We can't get away with this stuff now because it's stranger danger, but that person, that really upstanding person, even they can be bribed. Okay. And it says it again in Deuteronomy. There's this back and forth between Exodus and Deuteronomy, right? Because Deuteronomy is a retelling. So it says here in 16:19, you shall not take bribes, for bribes blind the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just. Okay. Again, someone can be right and be someone you don't like. That happens. And the other way around too, right? We can have a situation where, someone that you don't like is wrong. And it's just that simple. But either way, we don't get to manipulate the system in such a way that the people we feel are deserving are getting something, because inevitably that is going to upset the plea of the people who are in the right. So I see this in a lot of different ways, and you can interpret it however you want. But I think there are a lot of ways in our system where we can sort of bribe people, right? We can sort of say, hey, well, you'll have a little money for this, or, well, when you get out, there's a little bit of that for you. There's this opportunity. You can, get cash from this thing or whatever, right? And it goes to saying, like, all human beings have this problem. We all have this, what we call today, like a blind spot. We all have this blind spot towards our group and the people that we have deemed to be the most righteous. The second that bribes enter the picture, game over. Game over. Even for the most righteous. Rashi, who's a French vintner, who's a winemaker, rabbi, commentator, tends to be very pashat, tends to be very much a literalist. He takes this line, you shall not take bribes, and he goes further in his commentary. He says, even if you are going to give a just judgment in favor of the bribe giver. Okay. So let's say the person who's giving the bribe, yeah, like, but they're actually right. Like they're actually kind of a good person. They didn't commit that crime, or they are deserving of that recompense in some way. Like maybe they're just giving the bribe anyway, though. Maybe they're hedging their bets, right? So even if you're going to give a just judgment in favor of the bribe giver, as soon as the judge has accepted a bribe from one of the parties, it is impossible for him not to incline his heart to him, trying to find something in his favor, right? So, you know, again, it goes back to like, it is impossible for a person to be as righteous as they want to be when bribes are put in the picture. It just is that way. In the Talmud Sanhedrin, a judge is forbidden to handle a case if he's related to one of the litigants or has any other personal relationship. Okay? Other forms of corruption, are money and politics, right? That's a big problem. I think a lot of us agree on that. That's a nonpartisan issue, right? Jumping to Leviticus. I like this line here. You shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. You shall fear your God. I am Adonai, or I am Hashem, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. So if there are these people that have these, again, blind spots, maybe is the word that I would use, these areas that they can be manipulated, or things that they're, not necessarily taking good control of, putting money in front of them, even if you like them, is the equivalent of putting a stumbling block before the blind, right? It takes moral courage to do the thing democracy needs when it doesn't benefit you. And that's an important lesson. But again, these people who have these areas of deficit, right? God, we got to fundraise, right? And take it out of the political realm. A nonprofit is like, oh, we got to fundraise, right? or there's a person in your life. We can think about it like a family system, right? You have a person who's low income, and so you give them money because you want to be supportive. But the problem is they're going to use the money to buy drugs and alcohol. So what do they really need? They need love and support and treatment, right? But if you just give them money, it's actually placing a stumbling block before the blind. A little bit outside of the realm of this corruption conversation, obviously. But again, there's things that we do because we think it's the right thing to do, but we should actually recognize that the other person has these, call them issues, call them faults of character, uh, systems that are pushing down on them and making them the kind of person who would accept, for lack of a better word, bribes, right? Who could be swayed in one direction or another because of some kind of social benefit. It doesn't have to be money. It could be, we'll put you on the team, right? We'll give you the promotion, right? If you have these kind of deficits, or if you have these parts of your personality where people can make inroads into you by giving you promises, right? If you're the kind of person who can see that in people and you do those things to them, you take advantage of those parts of them, what the Torah here is thinking of as being deaf or being blind, right? You are not fearing God. Okay. There's another way of thinking about this verse, which is, well, why would you ever take it pashat? Why would you ever insult the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind? Like, why would you do that? And so one of the commentaries on this that I've heard, and I forget who it was that I heard this from, and I feel bad about that, but she said, well, think about what it would take in public. You're insulting the deaf or you're placing a stumbling block before the blind. Other people will see you, right? Other people will see you doing these things to people, and it's going to make you look bad, and it's going to make the Jewish people look bad. And also, the fish stinks from the head down. This is a Sicilian quote. Thank you to Rebbitzin for teaching me all these like Sicilianisms. Um, And so that's another thing that happens here, right? Like if you create a culture, maybe you've worked in a place like this, or maybe you've been part of an institution, or you've been in a school of some kind that's like this, where sort of bribery, manipulation, causing harm to others is just a normal part of the day, and you might say to yourself, like, look, I got to get the paycheck, right? Well, but this is the opportunity that I need. You're not fearing God. You're not. It's that simple. We've all been there too. I know I've been here. I know I've been in environments that are like this, right? And so what Judaism is saying here is no, no, no. We need to have a better environment together where this type of behavior is considered unacceptable. I said earlier it takes moral courage to do the thing democracy needs when it doesn't benefit you. Um, I'm looking right here at Representative M. Caldwell Butler, who says, I felt that if we didn't impeach, we'd just ingrain and stamp in our highest office a standard of conduct that is unacceptable. He is a Republican talking about Nixon. Another one. I've made a solemn pledge to uphold the Constitution, and my oath of office requires me to do just that. I did not come to this decision lightly or happily. I did not come to this decision with joy or with glee. I have come to this decision with great sadness and a heavy heart. This is a representative, and I hope I don't get the name too bad. The representative is Kwesi Fume, um, who was actually, I believe, in the Maryland area. And I should also say that Caldwell Butler was in Virginia. So Fume was a representative on the Democratic side, and he was talking about Bill Clinton, right? So you have a Republican impeaching a Republican and a Democrat impeaching a Democrat, right? It takes moral courage to do the thing that democracy needs when it doesn't benefit you. And actually, an amazing story about Butler is that he actually cried when he made the vote against Nixon. He said it was one of the hardest things he ever had to do in his life. Now, you could argue, and history will argue, whether those impeachments were right or wrong. And I'm not here to judge that. That's not what we're doing today. But the fact that you had people who were on those teams, right, and were willing to do this, I hope that they were doing it for the sake of heaven and that it wasn't some bribery thing, right? This is one of the problems when you allow bribery and corruption to infiltrate institutions, right? Whether it's schools, media, businesses, different parts of government, nonprofits, religious communities, whatever, is that there's like a post-truth reality. We don't even know, like, did Butler or Mfume actually do the impeachment because they felt it was the right thing to do? Was it for the sake of heaven? Lamont Shem Shemaim, right? Or was there like a deal being made? Isn't that rough, by the way, that like we don't even know how to judge what's going on because the corruption is so bad? Post truth, we have no idea what's going on. So here's the thing, and I didn't really think about it this much until I got married. And I married someone who knows a lot about public policy. I mean, a lot. You should sit down with Rebbitzin sometime and talk about this stuff. It's like you will sit and you will listen because you got to hear it. It's incredible. Um, but one of the things she and I kind of talk about is this idea that democracy should be boring. Like it should be really boring. So here's some lines here for you, both from Deuteronomy, a couple of verses apart from one another, 16:18 and then 16:20, which I said earlier. So you shall appoint magistrates and officials for your tribes and all the settlements that the Lord your God is giving you, and they shall govern the people with due justice. And then it skips a beat. Justice, justice you shall pursue, that you may thrive and occupy the land that your God Adonai is giving you. Okay. So, Zedek Zedek Teardorf, right? Like that's the protest sign stuff. That's the we're gonna change this thing, right? We're upset about this issue, right? We don't like what's going on with those people, whatever that may be for you. But it's not just Zedek Zedek Teardorf, right? It's not just this cherry-picked thing that sits in a bubble. What actually happens before Zedek Zedek Teardorf is the idea that we actually need judges and we need officials and we need people that can't be bribed, right? People who will have justice as the basis for how they administer a society. And this word Tirdof, this is Rodfe, this is a Rodef, this is like a pursuer, almost in like a military sense, right? Like the sense that you should go for justice is with the kind of energy that you would if you were in the army. Okay. It's that important. Rashi, who are going back to here on sort of this series of texts that is at Tirdof, he says, go to or search after a reliable court is sort of the idea behind this. He said the pursuit of justice is, about this reliable court. Okay. Reliable courts, again, can't be bribed. They're reliable. You see that person. So you have this situation where you have the shoftim and the shofrim. We don't really know exactly what their roles were, but they're these kind of tribal judges, these tribal courts, and you would know who is reliable, who is someone who's not bribed, right? Someone who today we might think of as just like, well, they're a bureaucrat, right? They're doing the job, right? They're not a this or a that. They're not team red, team blue, team yellow, team green, team whatever. They're just kind of Dave or, Dave Esquire, right? Or Your Honor, Dave. They're a reliable court. They're just known to be a court that is impartial, that's going to just process the darn thing. Okay. The pursuit of justice is not about activism in this perspective. Okay. Now, I'm not saying don't be an activist. I'm just saying that the pursuit of justice, Zedek Zedek Tirdof, here is not about the activism. It's about boring, government, wonky, suit and tie, nerdy stuff. It's about going in, doing the job, processing the paperwork, touching the button, having the meetings, all of that. But it is importantly about being in the structure that seeks justice impartially. Okay, like I said earlier, Tirdof, Rodef. Okay, this is a seeker in like a military sense of a term. Okay, we have to be that serious about something that boring, because if not, we get to this line in Pirkei Avot, which is a really great series of texts you should read. If you're not a person who's like done Talmud before, this is Pirkei Avot. Just look it up. You can do it on Safari on an app on your phone. This is a really good one because it's not as sort of esoteric as some parts of the Talmud are. It's a little bit more like reading Proverbs, or reading, the virtues of Benjamin Franklin or something like that. But Pirkei Avot is quoting a rabbi named Hanina, who's the sort of vice high priest, and he uses this line: "Pray for the welfare of the government, for were it not for the fear it inspires, every man would swallow his neighbor alive." Meaning, total, utter anarchy, not as a political idea, the absence of government, but truly, bands of warlords. You see this happen in several parts of Africa. It's happening right now, right? Just these roaming gangs that are vying for land. When it says pray for the welfare of the government, obviously we should do more than pray. We should be actively involved, right? But we need to understand what happens, right? What happens when a society devolves? And you get things like this. You get what's happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo, right? You get this in other areas where, it's gang turf war stuff, and that's pretty much it. And do we want our society to move in that direction? And I think if you believe in what I would call kind of enlightenment values, yeah, you don't want that. I also think here that piety is a great tool for democracies, which is part of why praying for the welfare of the government is something important. Rabbeinu Yonah is giving his commentary on Pirkei Avot in this particular section, and he says, "A person should pray for the welfare of the entire world and to be pained for the pain of others. So is the way of the righteous, as David of blessed memory said, 'As they were ill, my clothing was sackcloth, I suffered through a fast.'" So, using a line from Psalms to kind of promote this idea that we should not just pray for ourselves, but we pray for the entire world and for people around us. Goes further, a person should not only make personal supplications and requests, but should pray for all people that they remain in peace. And through the peace and stability of the government, there will be peace throughout the world. So, in other words, we all have to chill out. And part of chilling out is drawing into tefillah, drawing into prayer, such that we can understand that the world order, if you want to call it that. Order seems to imply sort of authoritarianism, and I don't mean it that way, but maybe the world systems is another way of wording it, can all just kind of dial it back a little bit, right? Maybe we can all just, take a little bit of a breath here. Okay, yes, we need justice. No doubt. Sometimes, and listen, you have to pursue it like it's the military, right? You got to be on the front lines of it. Absolutely, without a doubt. But also, we should be pained for the pains of others, because this is what the righteous do. We should pray to God for the welfare of the entire world, not just our government, but of all governments, and that there will be peace and stability. Okay, stability being something that matters incredibly. Because, look, here's the thing: all of these things we've read before, right? All of these things that we've read about having an impartial justice system, right? Having judges who are going to judge fairly, not inclining towards just the group that is powerful or the group that is marginalized for their own sake, right? It's about having this impartial system, having this boring, nerdy, wonky government that like people don't think about. And right now, right now I feel so bad because like there are people who work in government who are part of Kehila, and I'm like, oh no, they're gonna think I'm calling them wonky nerds. So now I feel really bad. And hopefully, like, you send me an email and tell me, like, wow, Rabbi, you really screwed up on that one. Maybe I'm kind of being hyperbolic, but at the end of the day, like, yeah, like that should be it. It's about peace and stability. Okay. That's what people really crave. Once you have stability, you can have justice. Justice before stability is very complicated. Okay. And I think that's what leads to social movements that actually are incredibly dangerous. When you're not thinking about how do we, stop the patient from bleeding first before we administer whatever treatments, pain medication, whatever. Like, you have to stop the corruption before you do anything else. And you have to have this stable, structured, whatever, so that then you can move forward with addressing all of the issues that a society has. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein will be the end of this podcast. Moshe Feinstein, very famous rabbi, commentator, kind of the original Jewish bioethicist in some ways. He's the reason why milk is considered kosher in America without kosher certification, although our Hasidic friends feel differently about that. But he said this in 1984. On reaching the shores of the United States, Jews found a safe haven. The rights guaranteed by the United States Constitution and Bill of Rights have allowed us the freedom to practice our religion without interference and to live in this republic in safety. A fundamental principle of Judaism is hakaras hatov, recognizing benefits afforded us and giving expression to our appreciation. So, gratitude is the word we would use. Therefore, it is incumbent upon each Jewish citizen to participate in the democratic system which safeguards the freedoms we enjoy. The most fundamental responsibility incumbent on each individual is to register and to vote. Therefore, I urge all members of the Jewish community to fulfill their obligations by registering as soon as possible and by voting. By this, we can express our appreciation and contribute to the continued security of our community. I'm going to add an addendum to that. Because listen, I have a lot of friends who are on all political perspectives. Truly, like I didn't know this one time. One time I had to give a speech somewhere, and the person who kind of introduced me opened the event, said, I've known Rabbi Patrick for however many years, and she said, and the one thing you'll know about him is he has an incredible, diverse friend group, more than she had ever seen before. And that wasn't the context of what I was supposed to talk about, and it caught me off guard. And I was like, "Oh, that's really nice, actually." To notice that I'm friends with a lot of different kinds of people. That felt good. So patting myself on the back, right? My ego, kind of blowing up there at the end of this podcast, but anyway, that felt really good to hear that. So anyway, back to the more important thing. I have a lot of friends, right? I've buried Democratic activists. I've buried Republican contributors, right? I've been to the life cycle events where politicians are. Yeah. It's not just at Federation when, a big community event happens. It's those quiet life cycle moments. Yeah, I've been there. I've been there with the activist, and I've been there with politician, and I've been there with the person running for office. Right? I've been there just in life, right? Not in any kind of political or justice or whatever sense, but just in the day-to-day, right? The normal rhythms of life. What I can tell you is the reason why people are in power in the United States is because people ran for public office. Whether it was them or someone who knew them who then got them a job, let's say, like an appointed position, it's because they actually ran. And I have people tell me all the time, and no one knows what my politics are, and I keep it that way. Everyone tells me, like, vote. Like, voting is so important. Get out and vote, 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 vote. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, I'm closing on him, right? Vote, vote, vote. Boy, do I agree 100%. Also run for public office. That's it. That's the addendum here, right? In 1984, an Orthodox rabbi, sort of, I think, the creator in some sense of this idea of like a modern Orthodox Judaism, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, is right. Vote. But now we're several generations away from this, right? That's 41 years ago. In that 40 plus years, I think now we're at a new point. Run for office. Get involved with something you can get appointed to, right? There are a lot of committees. There's a lot of citizen things that you don't have to, it isn't vote for Rabbi Patrick, right? It's not that kind of a thing. You sign a piece of paper and suddenly you're sitting in a conference room 4 times a year, right? Maybe you have a background in something and they need an advisory board, and they could be anybody. Like they could be state government. They could be your local school board, right? It could be anything. Just look for it, right? Don't sit on your phone and cry, okay? Join something. The greatest currency that we have now today is not financial. It really isn't. It's time. The people I know who are the most exhausted at any point in an election are the people who have time and could join that committee, be on that panel, run for that office, be part of that nonprofit and rise up and become the director, right? People who can get, for lack of a better word, elected to something. The reason why people win public office is they ran. That's why. And there was generally a 55-45, somewhere around there percent chance that they were going to win. Okay? It's just that simple. So you see the world and you see it's broken and you see corruption and you want to do something about it. Well, I'm here to tell you, vote, and more importantly, actually run for public office. I can buy any kind of jam I want to, right? Like if I go on Instacart and I type in strawberry jam, I can probably get 50 kinds of strawberry jam, right? But there are lots of seats for lots of offices that go unchallenged. Challenge it for the heck of it. Maybe you actually like the politician. Maybe you actually like the person who has that seat. But maybe you challenge them, right? Maybe you push it. Maybe you say, like, look, I would vote for you anyway, but like, there's that issue that matters and you're not doing anything about it. So I'm just going to be a nudge, right? I'm just going to be that person who just is there and it's going to annoy you and you'll win. Like maybe you're really popular and you get like 80% of the vote and I only get 20, like whatever. But I made the issue important to you because you wanted to win, right? And there you go. That's not corruption. Corruption would be saying like, okay, well, we're on the same team, so here's some money, so go do something I want you to do, right? Or scaring someone, saying, well, we're on the same team, so you better do this thing. If not, I'm going to make sure that such and such gets cut off, right? That's the that's the bribery. That's the bad stuff. The good stuff is running, because if you run for public office, you may actually sway people, and you'll do it honestly. So Feinstein, you're right. We have a safe haven here. Yes, there have been terrible moments. Anti Semitism right now is on a terrible rise. But we have the United States, we have the Constitution, we have the Bill of Rights, we have freedom of religion, freedom of practice, freedom of identity. We vote. More importantly, I think these days, in all areas, get involved, run for an office or get appointed to an office. And that is something incredible that you can do to spread Torah to your community and to push back on corruption. Thank you for your time. God bless.